Megan, you've told me that software is great, but you need a human relationship. Have you had people throughout your banking career pick up the phone and be like, I knew that I'd need you at some point. This is it.
Oh my God. That's D-Day, my friend. That is March 16th, 2023. When I was working for HSBC, we were in London for our venture debt offsite. And we were doing a roundtable discussion that weekend when SVB failed. I personally, because I was running originations at the time globally, had 279 emails and phone calls directly to me and my personal cell to say, hey, how quickly can we open a bank account? So I think that was the day that I realized, wow, all right, I guess all of the work does make sense for how much time I put into cultivating relationships.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to the Run the Numbers podcast. Today's guest is Meghan McKenna, founder of Females in Finance, FIF, and a longtime banker with stops at JPMorgan, HSBC, and Stifel. Meghan's the rare kind of person who can make capital markets and community building feel like deeply human endeavors. Across 2 decades in banking, from treasury and venture debt to private credit and cash management, she has watched the entire industry shift. In this episode, we talk about what's changed, what hasn't, and who's winning or losing in the new power rankings of finance. But we also zoom in on the human side. Meghan has this uncanny ability to connect people who should know each other, even if they come from totally different worlds. She breaks down how that skill was built, why in-person connection still trumps digital presence, and how the best people in finance are quietly the best at sales. Who knew it? Without even selling. We get into why tech is great until it's not. When deals stall or money goes missing, you do not want a chatbot. You want someone who knows your name. Meghan shares stories that prove the most valuable tools in finance still have a pulse. And with insights from over 1,500 finance pros in her network, she gives us a front row seat to what people inside the industry are actually talking about right now. And of course, we wrap it up with lessons from the long game, career missteps, early mentors, and why Meghan's version of leadership is all about giving without expecting anything back. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. All right, I got to get up on my soapbox for a sec here. Everybody's talking about AI-powered this and automated that. But here's the thing about revenue recognition. It's not just about moving data around. It's about getting it right, full stop. So RightRev is laser focused on one thing, RevRec that auditors actually trust. See, there's a difference between automating revenue processes and automating revenue recognition correctly. RightRev was actually built by the godfather of RevRec, who understands ASC 606 compliance, audit controls, data validation, and the flexibility needed for complex B2B contracts. We're not trying to be your billing system or your ERP. We're the revenue recognition engine that sits between your contracts and your financials, making sure every dollar is recognized correctly, on time, every time. Companies like Snowflake and Logic Monitor don't just need fast revenue reporting, they need revenue reporting that's audit ready from day one. And that's honestly where RightRev shines. And what I love about RightRev is they're not out there trying to be everything to everyone and just slap some, AI slop on top of it. While everyone is building these massive platforms that do everything in a kind of mediocre fashion, RightRev does one thing exceptionally well. They make sure your revenue recognition is bulletproof. Ready to stop gambling with your RevRec? Visit RightRev.com to see how we make complex revenue simple. That's RightRev.com, where revenue recognition actually works. Most finance leaders still see travel as a cost center, something to manage, reduce, or delay until the numbers look better. But the Navan Business Travel Index, validated by NASDAQ, empowered by millions of corporate transactions captured through Navan's platform on how organizations are meeting and investing in face-to-face connections to fuel growth, tells a different story. Companies that are growing are moving. Business travel activity is up double digits year over year. International hotel spend is rising faster than domestic. Rideshare use is surging as teams compress more high-value meetings into fewer days. This isn't about perks. It's about pipeline, deal velocity, and customer retention. The CFOs winning right now aren't slashing travel, they're optimizing it. They know exactly where every dollar is going and the ROI it's delivering. The Navan BTI helps you see how your program stacks up against the market each quarter and where you might be leaving revenue on the table. Get the data, spot the gaps, Turn your travel spend into a competitive edge. Download the latest Navan Business Travel Index today at navan.com/BTI. That's navan.com/BTI. And lead with the numbers that actually drive growth. Morgan Stanley recently said NetSuite is under the threat of disruption. That's right, NetSuite, the you never get fired for buying it software. So what's the threat? The answer, Rillet. Rillet is the AI native ERP modern finance teams are switching to because it's faster, simpler, and 100% built for how teams operate today. It doesn't take 12 months to implement, it doesn't feel like filing taxes to use, and your accounting team will actually love it. PostScript closes the books in only 3 days. Windsurf, bet you heard of them, they run finance with just 2 people. And Rillet is backed by Sequoia Capital. Yes, that's Sequoia. Unicorns like PostScript and Windsurf and hundreds of other companies have made the switch, and they're closing books in record time. If I were running a finance team today, I wouldn't default to legacy. I'd look at what's coming next, and Rillet is here. You don't want to be that guy at cocktail parties complaining about how bad his ERP is. Wait, am I the only guy who talks about ERPs around a keg? See how fast your team can move. Book a demo at rillet.com/metrics. That's RILLET.com/metrics. RILLET.com/metrics. Meghan McKenna, the most popular woman in showbiz. Welcome to Run the Numbers.
Thanks for having me, CJ.
You are like the most well-connected person I think I've ever met in my life.
I take that as a huge compliment coming from you.
But seriously, you're one of the only people who like they'll make a blind intro and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna trust this implicitly that like it's gonna be to somebody great. Like I remember when I was at Parts Tech, you introduced me to the Goldman Sachs vertical software team who helped our business a ton. I'm still friends with people like Brendan Halpin over there, who's been helpful to me in my career. But like you have this knack for connecting people, even from like disparate backgrounds. Like, has that always been like a skill that you've had with you your whole life, or have you had to hone that over time?
I think I've always had that skill, but people haven't always appreciated it. So I have always done a lot of blind intros, but in the beginning it was like, Megan, don't give me any of these blind intros. Now I have kind of a pretty trusted demographic and people have seen that I'm pretty good at deciding who should really meet, whether it's for acquisition purposes or just potential partnerships and things of that nature. I actually introduced 6 friends for marriages. So yeah, that is pretty much
Wait, go back. You've introduced 6 friends now for marriages?
I have, yes. We'll see how they work out in 10 years, but so far so good.
Megan, she can get you venture debt or get you married.
That should be my new tagline.
I feel like sales becomes like the job in any role the higher up you get. Would you agree with that?
I would say absolutely. And I think sales is different than what people think of it.
Well, let's break that down because I don't think all sales is like sales. Like what does sales mean to you?
You know, I think pre-COVID, there were a lot of people that understood relationship selling, and it was a lot harder, I think, to convert prospects in whatever it was that you were doing because so many people had kind of been around for a while within the sales organization and whatever type of position that they were working through. But now, you know, I think a lot of people that are starting their careers in sales haven't necessarily had the same training or the same ability to learn that it's not all about widgets, transactions, and hey, just because you have a cool product doesn't mean that everyone wants to hear about it. So I think starting to teach people a little bit that selling isn't always selling. It's more about knowing people, getting a trusted relationship with them is the best way to kind of convert from a prospect to a customer in anything that you're doing.
Well, that's something that I realized with you early on because I actually met you when I was at, holy shit, I was at Sneak and you were at HSBC and we were looking into treasury, I think back then, but like that just shows like you're willing to play the long game with people. I feel like that's a skill or an appreciation that's like lost on a lot of people from the most recent generation.
It always comes around. I think the long game works, especially if you know talented people and run in the right circles.
But like you need to be good at sales the higher up you get in any role. I do feel like there's an art and a science there. And I'm finding like particularly on the banking side, like you probably have to figure out what somebody's like actual needs are, because banking's something where like you can't like force sell that to somebody. Like the organ is gonna reject the body, or the body's gonna reject the organ pretty quickly if it's not the right
Yep.
thing. How have you honed that over time?
I think a lot of that still comes down to the person that you're working with, because I think a lot of the banks have caught up in terms of software efficiency. Everybody has kind of your standard checking accounts, you have your treasury products, you have yields that are somewhat comparable, and you have a lot of bankers that have disseminated into different places after there was some challenges back in 2023. So I think now it really does rely on, do you have somebody on the other side that you can trust if there's a KYC issue, or if a wire ends up getting lost in Japan? I think it's for stuff like that, as you become a bigger company, that matters a lot more. When you're smaller and you're kind of just taking off, I think it's less important, and you care more about getting higher yields and having kind of an easy access platform. But as some of the scaling challenges come into the equation as you get bigger, I think that's where it starts to really matter, who you have the relationship with and what are their internal capabilities and how they can navigate the organization that they're in.
And banking aside, like any product or service you're buying, like I've come to appreciate more and more that like when shit hits the fan, like having somebody to call. And me and you have riffed on this before. Like you want to have somebody who's going to help you solve the problem, not just like give you the product or service. And this came up in actually my personal life recently, because we have homeowners insurance, and like the rate that came back, just because like apparently everywhere in the world's a flood zone now, it was like 50% higher. And so I start doing like research, and I go into like Lemonade, which is like lower cost. And I send the quote to the guy, and he said, CJ, I'm not even going to try to compete with that if you're just going for lowest cost. If you want someone who's going to pick up the phone if something happens, go with us. And that was like closed deal. I was like, I'm just going to go with you.
By the way, highly recommend that. Living in Hoboken, we've been flooded out twice. So having a good person would have been very handy.
Megan, in a world where we're increasingly attached to our online presences and personas, it feels like females in finance like has it on lock when it comes to like being able to communicate online, but like you've really doubled down to meeting in person. How have people responded to that? Because I think a lot of us got like attached. Like I'm a CFO. It's pretty damn hard to get me like to leave my chair. Like I don't.
We're still trying to get you to a fifth event.
I know you're still trying to recruit me to one of those. But like how has the crowd responded to getting together in person?
Honestly, I think people love it. I think we do, where we specialize and where we've spent a lot of time making sure that there's a value add, not only within content, but within the people that are in the room, with the upscale locations that we do events at, with the food and beverage. People, time is money. And I think getting people out of their houses is important, but you want to make sure that you're doing it in the right way. And that's kind of that's our bread and butter at FIF. So any of the cities that we go to, we do not cheap out on just doing beer and wine. We have a seriously curated list that I go through 19,000 LinkedIn followers to place everybody that comes to our events. So there's a lot of work and a lot of method behind the madness.
There's like this interesting thing within finance. Like I've noticed that the people are very interested ahead of time of who's going to the event. And so you have to like carefully curate the list, because like if you're a CFO at a company making $20 million and you're sitting next to a CFO who's at a company that's making $2 billion, the CFO who's making $20 million, like, this is so cool. I can ask all the questions in the world. CFO is making $2 billion. Maybe they're a really nice person, but in the back of their head, they're like, how did I get stuck next to this person from such a small company?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's kind of, again, I think an art and a science to this as well, because I think in certain circumstances that $2 billion company, if they're sitting next to a $20 million company, that's a potential acquisition target. They're very excited to sit next to them. So I think it all comes into the planning and figuring out who should sit next to who. We tend to do, after each course, we have everybody kind of rotate seats, but in the initial stages of planning, I make sure that the people that I think potentially could work together are seated next to each other. So at least they start out there.
That's cool. And I like that you're not cheaping out on the booze. I didn't think you would, though, Megan.
It's like a wedding. You can't cheap out on the DJ or the band, and you can't cheap out on the booze.
Yeah. It's females in finance, but like finance is a broad category. What's like your ICP for a member?
We've actually evolved a little bit. So we have founders, CEOs, CFOs, VPs of finance, strategic finance, venture partners, private equity partners on the investing side. We actually have an ally advisory board that includes men. So most of our events are 60% women, 40% men, and they have to almost double qualify to be part of our ally advisory board. So we have some really heavy hitters that are part of the mission and add a ton of value to our WhatsApp chat, our Circle CRM, and the events themselves that are in person.
What's like the percentage of women in finance generally? Because that's like, I think it's awesome you're doing that. I'd imagine it's probably, it's definitely below 50%, but like, what is it?
It's getting better. I don't know the specific numbers, but what I will say is I've done a pretty good job of finding everyone. So whether or not we have them as members today or not, we kind of know who's out there, and we will keep coming. So.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. As a CFO, you're expected to bring clarity to everything, including how your company manages ownership. The tools you use should make that easier, not harder. But when they come with hidden fees, data you can't always trust, and support you can't rely on, you end up with more frustration than clarity. That's where Pulley comes in. Pulley is the cap table management platform built for finance leaders who need accurate, decision-ready data from a system that works for your business, not against it. With Pulley, you get intuitive workflows, audit-ready reporting, and support you can count on, all backed by predictable pricing you can plan around, so you can stay compliant and make smarter decisions about your company's future. Manage everything from fundraise modeling to ASC 718 reporting to custom liquidity programs, all on one trusted platform. Hundreds of high-growth companies like Linear, Fathom, and Runway trust Pulley to help turn ownership into a strategic advantage. And joining them is now easier than ever. You can switch to Pulley in as little as 5 days. And for a limited time, they're offering 25% off your first year. To claim your exclusive offer, visit pulley.com/mostlymetrics. That is pulley.com/mostlymetrics. pulley.com/mostlymetrics. Listen, being a CFO, it's not always that glamorous. Sometimes I find myself watering the plants and taking out the garbage in the office. And, you know, the best CFOs I know they're true business leaders. They know how to drive growth in heroic fashion. Unfortunately, the status quo of finance makes that really hard because day to day, we're mostly up to our eyeballs in spreadsheets and receipts. Thankfully, there's a financial provider who has built a solution to match your ambition, Brex. Brex designed a modern corporate card and spend platform that controls spend proactively and automates tedious expense and accounting tasks. Brex frees up CFOs to focus on the high-impact projects that drive growth. You know, the shit that's actually worth your CFO time. So how does Brex work? You can embed your expense policy inside the corporate card to prevent out-of-policy spend before it happens. Receipts and memos are auto-generated, so you always have what you need to close the books fast. Managers get freed up from reviewing, every possible expense under the sun because in-policy expenses are auto-approved and AI will flag any exceptions. And all the while, your expense detail is syncing with your ERP because Brex integrates with almost all of them. I love that, from QuickBooks to NetSuite. It's your time to shine as the strategic growth driver you are, and Brex can make it easy. More than 30,000 companies like DoorDash, Coinbase, and SeatGeek use Brex to make every dollar and every minute count. Join them at brex.com/metrics. That's brex.com/metrics. So if you listen to this podcast, you'll know that I am incredibly passionate about the FP&A space because that's the route I went to get to CFO. And I want to tell you about a tool that has exploded over the past few years. It's called Aleph. And I remember getting outbounded by them about 2.5 years ago, and I actually took the bait because they claimed to be able to do a demo with my live data, with me right there on the call. And so I had to see it to believe it. And it was the founder running demos back then. Shout out Albert, hope you're listening. And he connected my NetSuite and built my P&L using their Excel add-in in like 15 minutes. And I was really impressed. Since then, Aleph has gone on to raise money from some of the top VCs out there, and they've built an impressive roster of customers. Many of their customers have been on the podcast, like the CFO at Turo, 8 Sleep, and Zapier. They're all really big champions and supporters of Aleph like me. But it's not just an Excel add-in. Aleph also allows finance teams to work with their live cross-system data using Google Sheets and their web app. And that's cool because it gives teams the option to support a wide range of needs and workflows like budgeting, forecasting, and variance analysis. And speaking of variance analysis, they're doing some really cool things with AI-powered variance analysis. It basically allows you to figure out what's going on and why, and it takes the time that you'd usually spend from hours to minutes. It's really cool. So I highly recommend checking them out and taking them up on that demo or trial, just like I did back in the day. And you can learn more and get started at getaleph.com/run. That is getaleph.com, aleph.com/run. Tell them CJ sent you. Well, we'll get back to Fifth in a little bit, but I want to take a detour to go over the banking landscape because you've been a player in this for over 20 years. You've worked at JPM, HSBC, Stifel, and a lot of experience across treasury, venture debt, cash management. If you think back of like, Megan, when you started 20 years ago, how has the ecosystem evolved with like the players that are involved?
I think it's kind of interesting. It depends on what sector you're in and what stage you're in. So I think in kind of the earlier stage world, I think a lot changed on March 16th, 2023, but there's a ton of players, both traditional banks and fintechs that are playing in that space. But I think as you continue to kind of go later stage, companies that are going public or private equity backed, I think you still have kind of a lot of the same traditional players in that world. JPMorgan's always going to be the 100-pound gorilla, HSBC, Citibank, Bank of America. I think those folks are always going to kind of play well as companies need international and other more complex products. But in the early stage, probably call it before Series C, I think there's a lot of competition and there's a lot of interesting, fun technology that's come out that has made that a more competitive landscape.
Over the last decade, which bank do you think has had the biggest come up?
That's a tough question. Honestly, I'd like to say because when I was at HSBC, it was us. But I think there has been quite a few, I think, that have made some inroads. Again, I think like JPMorgan has not really faltered. And
they've always been big, though.
Yeah, so they are who they are. I think that the new First Citizens has kind of surprised, I think, the market on being pretty stable, coming in with really solid term sheets. And I think everyone did not foresee that they were going to be around and be very good at what they do. So I'm pretty impressed and kind of happy with the grit that the teams over there have shown.
Do you think the industry is more consolidated or more fragmented than it used to be?
I think in the earlier stage, it's definitely more fragmented. I mean, I personally now with FIF, we have 3 different providers that we use on the banking side. So I have my operating account with JPMorgan just because it's pretty easy on the online platform and I used to sell it. So it's pretty easy to navigate myself. But then I have my corporate cards with Ramp. I have a liquidity account with ARC because the yield is pretty significant and KYC was a breeze. So I think depending on the size of the company and what you're looking for, there's a lot of different challengers out there that are kind of coming to market and doing some pretty cool things.
I'm so glad you brought that up because like when I started as a CFO, it felt like you would try to pick like a best of breed bank that did like everything, like one thing really well and everything else like kind of well. But now would you agree it feels more modular, like you're building your own banking stack?
For sure. I think all of the large banks are trying to catch up, to be innovative, to be efficient. But at the end of the day, a lot of them are still on-prem with 120 different systems in the background, and changing that is not easy. So it's not going to be an overnight conversion. I think some are doing it better than others. But if you are just a U.S. domestic small business, you kind of don't need a lot of the bells and whistles that the JPMorgans or some of the other larger institutions provide. And that's kind of where they really shine and do the best work.
Megan, what I've noticed is that it used to be all about like the traditional banks, but now it feels like you can choose your own adventure when it comes to having different partners who may not even actually be banks. How has that evolved since you started in the banking world with the rise of the Brexes and the Ramps and the Mercuries?
Yeah, I would say that honestly, it is kind of more of a modularized type of an offering that we're building over at FIF within our banking stack. Again, I still think it kind of comes down to the relationship factor, right? Who's going to be there in the trenches? Who has backed you? And we've had some companies that have really been with us since the early days and remain supportive of FIF and continue to be big partners. So I have my corporate card program with Ramp. I have my operating account with JPMorgan because I used to work there and I know chase.com pretty well. But then I also have most of my liquidity outside at ARC because of the relationship I had with them early days, plus the fact that they have pretty significant yield and easy onboarding. So I think, if you told me 20 years ago that I would start a company and I wouldn't be just putting all of my money with one balance sheet king, you probably wouldn't think that that would be the case. But yeah, here we are.
The other thing, like if I put my CFO hat on, that's evolved a lot is the rise of private credit. And there are all these funds out there where you can go and get money that like before you had to get like a traditional bank loan syndicated.
Yep.
What's going on in like the private credit world? Are people in Fifth talking about this?
I think that is probably the biggest change. I think a lot of the private credit funds are coming in with very cost effective, low covenant options that make a lot of the banking deals look like it doesn't really make sense. So one of my good friends and probably one of the best credit structures that I know, Ruslan, ended up over at Hercules Capital, and I've keep seeing that their announcements and big chunky deals that they're doing. So I think that too is going to be an area that the funds have a lot of capital, they have a lot of quality people, and if you can compete with the banks for debt, then there's a good chance that you'll win.
And like 10 years ago, you wouldn't expect a bank and a private credit fund to even be around the same table going after the same deal, right?
Yep. And I think that's also a reflection of kind of the market and the times, because now venture backed companies are really exciting, and that's what everybody kind of wants to look at. But 10 years ago, it was cash flow kings only, and that's the only way you would be able to get debt. So that too is an interesting dynamic. And after the fall of 2021, I'm curious to see how that changes too in the next 10 years.
Yeah, we're big fans of Hercules. We've had Ruslan on the podcast. We've had Catherine Jung on the pod.
Oh, nice.
That was like eye-opening to me, just how much money there is to go around for companies that are like really great companies, but still burning cash. Because like before, you would often feel like you were between a rock and a hard place. And like SVB was the only place to go.
Yep.
But like now that you have these private credit funds, it feels like a whole new world.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, I think, since SVB's demise, you have a lot of those same bankers over at HSBC, at Stifel, at MUFG, at CIBC. So I think a lot of those same people are kind of fighting for the same relationships that they had over there. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out too.
Yeah, one of the friends of the podcast is Bob Pulley, who's at MUFG. He took about 25 incredible bankers, a lot of them from SVB, and built up this juggernaut over there. But like, I feel like there's been this diaspora of talent, probably a lot of the people in your network who ended up doing like entrepreneurial things almost within these bigger banks that wasn't the reality before.
Yep. I think that also has been a way. I think a lot of the banks have been innovative, having a head of community or a head of events. You never would have thought that would be a job. And now all of the banks have them. And it makes a lot of sense because, again, it all still comes back to relationship and having people on the other side of the computer.
You have some of the best late stage private CFOs in your community who you've been kind enough to introduce me to for the podcast. Companies are staying private longer. How does that impact like how the banks that they bank with make money?
I think honestly now the banks have to kind of go back to their core. Obviously, we've seen a lot of reports of downsizing and layoffs, and some of the banks that aren't, your top 5 investment banks doing a lot of that. But I think now the banks have to go back to their roots of treasury, earning yields in other ways, and, depending on what the bank's position is, cash management can be a very lucrative business, and it tends to be more sticky anyway. So I think if you want to have long-term relationships that matter, maybe it's good that they have to start a little bit earlier in the process to get people excited about working with them for the day that the IPO or the exit finally comes.
Can you say more about that? So you're saying like they have to do a better job of creating an on-ramp to working with them like before, if they're going to be like an IPO ready company?
I think they kind of have to put a little bit more work in earlier in the process now, because I think, a lot of investment bankers probably were spending most of their time with the targets that were very much ready to pop. Now that world is very different. And I think the metrics behind it, the folks that they thought were going to be kind of the heavy hitters may not necessarily be them anymore. So I think now they kind of have to rethink the playbook and figure out, all right, what are some other very lucrative ways that we can still kind of keep money and get into the right door so that we know when the next IPO is going to happen?
Stupid question, but like we all know that incentives drive outcomes. Traditionally, which section of the bank or which department in the bank was like pulled in the most money?
It had to be investment banking
That's
for
what I
sure.
figured.
But at the same time, again, depending on which bank you're talking about and where they position themselves, if it wasn't really a cash king, they probably should have already made that decision to kind of switch and think about other ways to strengthen the balance sheet.
And I'm guessing that like in the low interest environment, the treasury, I guess, chip that a CFO has to put on the table, that's probably not the best negotiating point to go to a bank with.
It's tough, and even when I put my old treasury hat on, I mean, it encompassed more than that. It was foreign exchange, it was corporate card programs, and a lot of that stuff now is also being outsourced to fintech. So
Oh,
it's getting
really?
harder and harder, I think, for the traditional banks to make money.
I want to dive into that piece because we were saying how it's being like it's becoming a modularized stack. That was a hard word. I should try to write that down see if I
I
can
know.
spell it. I can try kind of say it. I probably can't spell it. Like the fintech stepping in, like you see Wise. That's pretty interesting with the cross border.
Yep.
You see Revolut. They're huge with foreign currency, and then you see the Brexes and the Ramps and the Mercuries who are helping on the banking and corporate side for like cash
Yep.
deposits as well as corporate cards. Do you think that like forces the whole ecosystem to like get better at what they're doing in the traditional banks, or do you think they're looking at it like let's either buy or partner with these players?
I think it's more likely that we'll see a lot of acquisitions from it, but I do think it does make them kind of think, all right, should we be rethinking how we're doing it internally and building it ourselves? Because a lot of the banks can kind of replicate a lot of the stuff that is out there. So I think that's kind of what we're going to see. It's either going to be a buy it strategy or it's going to be a build it themselves.
And there are a number of banks that kind of made their bread and butter with FX and international stuff. Like I know Citi has like an investment banking division and stuff, but like weren't they always known for being really good at international?
I think that they definitely have very good coverage and a lot of regions and different areas that they're focused on. I would say my ranking, but again, I'm a little bit biased because I did work at two that I thought were pretty tremendous. My ranking would probably be JPMorgan alongside HSBC and then probably Citi bringing in third. But again, I didn't work at Citi, so that's probably why.
I used to bank personally with Citi, and they just sent me my entire life savings in an envelope one time without telling me. So probably won't go back to them. They're probably not going to sponsor podcasts after me saying whatever.
I don't think they're going to sponsor Fifth either.
They're probably not listening. You have the insights of more than, is it really 1,500 professionals in Fifth
So we
now?
have 1,500 that are subscribers right now. We just started monetizing our member network in January, and we have about 300 that have converted to that. So
Hell yeah.
it's exciting. It's definitely a lot of growth.
Well, what's been the biggest discussion point lately related to either fintech or banking?
There's been quite a lot. I mean, we have over 300 people in our WhatsApp chat, which is super active and fun. And I think a lot of the conversations still revolve around AI and whether or not our finance executives are even touching the concept of truly implementing it at this point in time. Because I think there's a lot of talk about it. People want to do it. It just doesn't necessarily make sense for the lift of what they're looking to use it for. I think the challenges with quantitative analysis makes it harder for the person in the finance seat, and just kind of the unknown and the risk of having to deal with governance issues tends to come up quite a bit. So I think like I'd put that in the forefront of things that come up. ERP system challengers is something else that is consistently discussed. We're actually doing an ERP demo day with a bunch of the challenger ERPs that are out there, because I think that's another area that people are trying to say, all right, I need to figure out how to streamline my life. And there's a lot of really good candidates out there that are helping that.
Isn't it funny that the ERP used to be like the last vestige of like no
Yeah.
one would touch it, right? Because like
Yeah.
no one's going to innovate there. But now you have all these companies. You have Rillet, you have Campfire, you have Quanta. They came out of the woodworks and they're coming out with some kick-ass products. Like 10 years ago, it was either use NetSuite or you use QuickBooks. It's pretty much it.
Yep. Or Sage as you got bigger. But yeah, it's definitely eye-opening. And three of the founders of some of those ERP challengers are actually Ally advisory board members of FIF. So we have Rillet, we have Dual Entry, who's actually also a silver sponsor. So we're super excited to have them, and Everest as well.
Nice. And it's kind of like as a finance professional, you have to make AI and all these systems that are coming out like part of your day job. Whereas like before, I don't know, maybe twice a year you would take a pitch from a vendor, but now it's like you don't want to get left behind.
Yep. I think demo days are kind of a new thing that everybody is adopting, regardless of kind of sector or what the focus point is. Because then you also have revenue automation companies. We just did a dinner last night with Tabs that was fabulous, but everybody there was super excited to talk to the Tabs team about what they're building. So even that was a little bit of a different dinner structure than I've seen. Normally, it's just everybody wants to come, hang out, have some good food, but people were super excited about Tabs in general and kind of how they're innovating. So I thought that was an interesting part of the fifth developments of our dinner.
Yeah, Ollie and Rebecca from Tabs are incredible. I'll get on the phone with them or I'll see them at a dinner. I'm like, okay, explain AI to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
That's very true. And I love that you've actually seen them at a dinner. That means you get out of your house just after
Yeah,
fifth.
yeah. If they go to one of your dinners, then I'll come. How about that? Megan, you've told me that software is great, but you need a human relationship, like we said, when something goes wrong. Have you had people throughout your banking career pick up the phone and be like, I knew that I'd need you at some point. This is it. I'm calling it a favor.
Oh my God. That's D-Day, my friend. That is March 16th, 2023. When I was working for HSBC, we were in London for our venture debt offsite because at that point in time, we only had, I think, a handful of customers, but very lucrative customers because our venture debt strategy was very different than the one they have now. And we were doing a roundtable discussion that weekend when SVB failed. I personally, because I was running originations at the time globally, had 279 emails and phone calls directly to me and my personal cell to say, hey, how quickly can we open a bank account? So I think that kind of was the day that I realized, wow, all right, I guess all of the work does make sense for how much time I put into cultivating relationships since they kept my number and were able to find me even when I was in London.
When you think about the concept of a bank run, because I'd only seen them in movies, like, I don't know, I guess off the record, but on the record, because we're on a podcast, like, I kind of feel like we all did SVB kind of dirty by like pulling all the money out. Like, with some space from it, what's your reaction to what happened?
I don't know, man. I feel like if I had money at that point in time and I was a business owner,
Yeah.
I probably would have been scared too. But I do think if you were around and I don't know, like old, like some of us in 2008, that was also a time when people thought that a lot of things were going to happen and it always works itself out. Yeah. True panic, I will say is real and people get scared and that causes a lot of problems. So maybe rethinking how we look at that the next time that something similar does happen, because it will.
Yeah.
Maybe not panicking probably makes a little bit more sense.
Do you think like the risks are the same from one period to another? I mean, like you've been through a number of cycles now, like 2008, 2023. Like what in your
Yeah.
mind, like are these just like the same risks playing out again for finance professionals, or are we constantly coming up with new risks to trip over?
I think with technology, there's just going to continue to be new risks. So that's kind of the scary part. And even job security now, right? I think with like AI continuing to improve itself and people continuing to train it that are the, financial professionals on the other side, I have no clue what's going to happen. My crystal ball is definitely not filled with a lot of thoughts. So it's a scary time, I think, for everybody when you don't really know what's to come on the technology side, and compliance, risk, governance, all of that has not really caught up with what solutions are being created. I don't know. I probably watched too many horror movies.
Something that I know people ask both of us is like, how do you think about building a personal brand when it comes to being a finance professional? And like historically, that wasn't like a thing, especially within finance. Maybe like if you were in marketing or you were in like product, but like how do you think your brand has become like a differentiator or a moat for like what you built?
I think what I've always kind of prided myself on is I saw myself more as like a head of corp dev when I was a banker. I never really saw myself as a banker because I didn't love the analytical part of, going to work and analyzing spreadsheets and going through financials. I really loved closing deals, doing business and connecting people. So I think that kind of played out of me just organically continuing to be myself and catering to what my skill sets were versus what, the concept of a banker was supposed to be. And I think that's kind of what gave me the strength at the end to kind of do this full time. Since I'm able to be myself, I no longer have a boss and I can work with all of the banks as partners if they decide to sponsor and be a partner to FIF.
And it like being yourself is a competitive moat in and of itself because like no one's gonna like out Megan, if you know what I mean.
And I think, I'm in a very different place in my life, in my career than a lot of people. So I think I have the ability to be myself a little bit more. I don't have kids. I had a successful career. Really, it's just me and my husband. I don't have parents anymore that I have to take care of at home. So if I'm in a position in my life that I can help others and I can do good, I want to kind of do that since there's a lot of people that can't because they do have other burdens and other priorities that come first.
You have a lot of really impressive people who are members of Fifth. I imagine part of the benefit they get is actually the benefit of giving back. And like these people at this point, like a lot of them make a lot of money, right? Like they're at a point in their career where they can give back. It must be pretty cool to see those combos go down.
I mean, it's awesome. The community that we've built, I really do strongly believe it's different than every other one out there because I think everyone genuinely that is part of it wants to help one another. And you see that in the WhatsApp thread, you see that in the rooms that they're in. Everybody is not really asking, "Hey, I want to sell you something." It's, "How can I help?" And I think that's something I really missed for a long time in a banking career. You didn't necessarily see that. It was a little bit more of everyone out for themselves versus trying to figure out how they can, at the end of the day, help one another.
I've noticed the same thing, especially in finance. There's like this scarcity complex that like, and also when it comes to knowledge, it's not just like getting a job, like, oh, there's only one role, I want to have it. It's like, I don't want you to think that this is simple because if I keep it in this complicated box, then it's like, it's mine and there's less competition for it.
Yeah, including networks. I think people hold way too tightly to their networks and don't introduce people to one another because they think they own them. And I think that is the biggest mistake anyone can make. I think if you are generous with your network, I think karma will pay you in full, but people see that as confidence and respect it. So I think I would say for everybody that does listen to this, share your network. I think that's a good thing. The more people that can do business together, the better you'll be received in market.
That is so fascinating. I've never thought about it that way because people do like cling on to their networks as if it's like my relationship with them is an asset. If I give it to you, then like I don't have as much.
Even it comes down to, I think, like, bankers or salespeople of software companies, all of these CRMs kind of force you into that mentality. You have to like tag somebody as a prospect and then you own them. I think that whole concept should go out the window because I think anybody can meet anyone anywhere. And if you have a better chance of helping someone to successfully close a deal, why wouldn't you choose that over having it assigned to a physical name that has no shot in hell at closing the business? So that is something I think everybody should kind of rethink how they're looking at CRMs and how to tag clients to salespeople.
Isn't it funny? It's actually called an object in a CRM.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very valid point, which is wild.
Yeah, in the finance world, we tend to look at everything as like a zero-sum game. But I think that like if you talk to any successful person at all these events, there's someone in their career that either gave them a shot at something or they introduced them to that one person to get them in the room. It's like you have to do the work once you get there, but like how do you give that person just like a warm intro? And I think that goes underappreciated in a lot of scenarios.
I agree. And I think people should remember who kind of helps them when they don't necessarily have to. And that's been something that, I've had a hard time with kind of at FIF because I always was somebody that anyone asks for a favor, I'm happy to do it. I don't ask for anything in return. And now that this company where we're kind of trying to monetize, my biggest challenge is I have to stop looking at things personally and understand that it is a business and, people have to see enough value to pay for it. So for me, that's been my biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you have a personal relationship with somebody and then a business relationship, and then you're trying to bring something to the table as well. And it's like, I don't want you to look at this as a transaction where I'm cashing in a
Right.
chip, but we're all trying to work together in an ecosystem.
Yeah.
If you think back on your career being a female in finance, was there somebody who like gave you a shot that you still look back and say, wow, thank you for that?
I mean, there's been a ton along the way. I'd say initially when I first started in banking, I did not think I was going to be in banking. I was a sociology major at Colgate, and I played on the women's basketball team there. And one of my teammates was going through the management development program at M&T Bank. She was a year ahead of me. And she and I were very similar in our personalities, very similar in our backgrounds and our upbringing. And she absolutely loved it and said that she thought that it would be a good fit for me. So I applied, and that's the only reason that was in banking until September of this year. I think it was a lot of not knowing what I wanted to be, but following someone that I respected and saw very synergistic to kind of how I look at the world, and it paid off. But I will tell you now, with how competitive the job market is and for what people are looking for different entry level jobs, I am so happy that I am not going through it at this point, because the kids out there that are graduating right now are unbelievably brilliant.
They are, and they all know how to use technology in a way that many of us don't. I'm wondering someday, like, I killed myself. Like, it used to be really cool if you knew like how to do macros in Excel. Like, that was like considered wizardry. Like that, like completely thrown out the window. I think like the younger generation is gonna be at a point where like they'll never even learn how to do like a long ass sum if or like VLOOKUP. Like that'll just be not something they ever had to go through.
And they'll never have to ford the river in Oregon Trail. So I actually feel bad for them for that. So
I like to think I learned something in all of that pain, but I don't know.
it is true. And even just like, writing or researching. I mean, we had encyclopedias. I'm really dating myself and feeling old, but the whole world and how technology is at everybody's fingertips is tremendous, but also terrifying.
I remember in middle school there was a door-to-door salesman who was selling Encyclopedia Britannica, and we bought it like in a household. And it was like, this is
Yeah.
so cool. We have so much info if I'm ever doing like a book report.
My first sales job in college, I sold Cutco knives, and I still credit that is the reason I am in sales.
Did you ever get a door slammed on you?
No, because luckily with Cutco, it was basically, hey, sell to all your friends and family, and we'll give you a couple of $100 for your summer vacation. And that's kind of how it was structured.
The original multi-level marketing.
It was wild. But I will say, I still strongly believe in the quality of those knives. Forever guaranteed, ergonomically designed to fit right into your hand, and I still believe in them.
Cutco Knives, not a sponsor of the show, but it'll cut your steak.
Not yet, but they should be.
Yeah. Megan, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So you're a successful person. You have an amazing network. But I ask every person who comes on, give me one thing you've messed up on the job before, one mistake you've made along the way.
Well, I would definitely say staying too long in specific roles that I probably should have left earlier. I was a little bit, I think, too loyal in the early days of my career and didn't believe in myself enough. So I'd say that's one thing.
Yeah, well, I think that's an amazing point. How has that changed in today's day and age? Because I feel like, especially in tech, like if you look outside of banking, like people are free agents out there. It's like, who's gonna pay?
People hop for everything. Yeah. But I'm sure compensation wise, it definitely probably held me back. And I probably would have been at this point a little bit earlier if I had taken a little bit more calculated risk throughout that journey. So I do think now people don't necessarily stay loyal to any institution for a very long time.
What's your advice to younger people who may be in banking or in finance who have been in a role for a couple of years? Like, how do you know when it's time to move on to something new?
I think if you look around and you are doing better than all of your peers in whatever it is that you're doing, it's time to start thinking about what you should be doing next and making sure that you're valued for what it is you are producing. Yes, everyone has to climb a ladder and everyone has to put a lot of work into it. But at the end of the day, if you can look around and you're the best in class, make sure that the company appreciates you in that way as well.
If you could give your younger self advice, knowing what you know today, what else would you tell her?
Probably don't go into banking. No, I'm kidding. I would probably say something similar. Just know your worth, believe in it, and make the decisions that are right for you, not necessarily what everybody else around you thinks that you should do. I think sometimes I kind of got in my head and relied on other males' opinions of what I should do with my career. And if I had not listened to them, I probably would have been in a better place earlier.
Last one I got for you. If you think about all the deals that you've helped close over the years, What's a memorable one or a story associated with one that you think about from time to time?
One of my other friends who actually was at our Tabs dinner last night is the CFO of Port 53, and his name is Alex Giro. He was one of my first customers from HSBC when I was a banker on the tech team. At the time, he was at a company called Fancy.com. They had a ton of spend with us on corporate cards. They were a huge client, and they were my biggest customer in my portfolio. So I wanted to make sure that anything Alex needed, I was there. And he told me to jump, I'd say how high. So ironically, it was the day of my rehearsal dinner for my wedding. And they had a huge corporate card issue. And he called me literally when I was getting ready to walk down the aisle to do my rehearsal for our wedding. And I answered, and I literally told the priest, I'm like, sir, you got to wait. I got to figure this out. And we ended up like escalating to a bunch of people on the corporate card side, and I handled it. And then after the fact, he was like, wait, where are you? I was like, well, I'm actually at my rehearsal dinner. We're about to like finish walking, do the practice round. And he was like, why are you picking up the phone? And I was like, because you needed me and you're my client. So ever since then, when I was a banker, he followed me from 3 different companies to work with me there. So that's a pretty wild story.
That's like, I'm envisioning like a Disney movie with like the driven bride at like her wedding who's like, hold on, I got to take this call.
Yeah. And it was literally that. I feel like my husband was probably like, is this happening? What's going on?
Megan, this has been a blast. If people want to learn more about what you're building at Fifth, where can they find you?
I would check out www.fifcollective.com, but I could also be reached via email at Meghan, MEGHAN, at fifcollective.co.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.